cars. All right, let's turn your attention to this now. South African-born billionaire Elon Musk is blazing a trail of world firsts with mass-produced electric vehicles that have taken the global market by storm. But South Africans have been quite slow, some might say, to catch on to this global trend of zero-emission vehicles that run solely on electricity. According to a recent forecast by Deloitte, electrical vehicles are poised to capture just over a third of all new car sales, and that's in the next 10 years. But with road transport accounting for almost all carbon emissions in South Africa, it's clear that attitudes need to change. Generation.e, together with AutoTrader, have embarked on a wide-scale survey to determine if South Africans are ready to give up petrol and opt for something cleaner, for lack of a better term. Well, for more on this, let's bring in Ben Pullen. He's CEO of Generation.e, joining us now live from Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. Ben, thanks very much for your time. Welcome to the AM Report here in South Africa. I guess in a country like ours, it's very difficult to speak about electrical anything without necessarily being concerned about our power generation woes. I wonder how much of the survey that you're putting together to try gauge South African sentiments factor that huge factor, for lack of a better term, when thinking about whether or not we should, in fact, be heading over to electrical cars.
Absolutely. Thanks, Leander. It's good to be with you this morning. I think we definitely can't hide away from the elephant in the room around electricity supply and stability. That's definitely something on the minds of everyone. But what this survey does do is it really understands the perceptions of consumers around electric vehicles, and we have asked questions around what some of those main barriers might be to purchasing or using an electric vehicle, and electricity supply is one of the answers that were featured in there.
Yeah. And what are the other perceptions that you've been able to find? I know as a South African myself, I imagine costs is pretty high up on the list.
Yeah, so we're going to release the survey results at Smarter Mobility Africa in 2 weeks' time. So that will be on the 28th of October. AutoTrader and Generation.e will publish those and release that at the summit, the virtual summit. So I can't give away too much now, but we definitely have asked questions around cost, around charging expectations, around range expectations. I think, we were just to give a taste of what to expect. We were pleasantly surprised in some of the areas of the way that the AutoTrader audience actually has answered these questions. So I feel really sort of interested to share these with South Africa and the rest of the world, because there's a lot of stakeholders around the world that are really interested to understand how the electric vehicle industry would unfold in South Africa over the next few years.
Right. I guess as we count down to that moment, we wait with bated breath. But let's speak about some of the background debates that are taking place insofar as electrical cars are concerned. The long-rehearsed argument is that an electric car is a cleaner alternative. But often we then hear people saying, but electric cars need power. And again, in a country like ours, given our infrastructural setup, much of that power is generated through non-renewable resources such as coal, which inevitably add to our carbon footprint in the country. So is it really solving the problem, or perhaps just swapping it for a different form of the same issue?
I'm glad you asked that question, because it's a question that pops up into everybody's mind. Since 2018, when the Department of Transport launched the Green Transport Strategy, there has been a lot of research that's being conducted. Some research that came out last year, 12 months ago, by the Trade and Industrial Policies Research Group. It showed that actually, even when you charge an electric vehicle from coal, you still have a 34% decrease in greenhouse gas emissions. Now, the grid will only progress towards renewable energy over time, and it already is wind, solar in South Africa. And so if we get to a fully renewable grid, then we start to look at more like 67% decrease in greenhouse gas emissions. So currently, if you had an electric vehicle today, it would still make environmental sense if that's why you were purchasing one.
Yeah, it would make environmental sense perhaps for our era, our decade, our generation. I imagine future generations, though, will look back and think, geez, these guys were so, short-sighted in their response to what many people describe as a climate crisis. Is there prospects of a completely clean alternative that's been worked towards, a situation where essentially we're not releasing any toxins into the environment as we continue to, I guess, reintegrate our technological advances as humans?
It's a great question. And once you've built the electric vehicle, because there's obviously a certain amount of carbon emissions embedded into building anything that we use, but once that electric vehicle has been built, if the power is actually from renewable sources, then you're basically seeing a completely clean, zero emission vehicle as you drive. That means no greenhouse gas emissions, but it also means, and this is really important for certain parts of South Africa, that you reduce air pollution. And Johannesburg has been ranked one of the worst cities in the world for air pollution at times. And so it's important that we also consider the air that people are breathing, because that has an impact on public health, has an impact on the economy. And there's no reason really in this day and age why we should be driving vehicles, whether that's consumer vehicles or commercial vehicles, that are just pumping out lots of particulates that are harmful to our health.
Yeah, you mentioned Johannesburg. It's certainly one of the cities in South Africa where a lot of people drive quite far distances on a daily basis. Given the current technology we have, would an electric car be able to meet those demands? I'm only asking this because I remember reading that, part of the difficulty at the moment is that electric cars and how durable they are don't necessarily stand as a direct supplement or a direct substitute to, their counterparts that use petrol or diesel. I don't know if I'm making sense.
You are, yeah. Well, if you drive a car in Gauteng, an electric car, you can get around perfectly fine. You wouldn't need to charge for most of the days. You could just get along with your normal daily routine. And last year, when we drove out from the EVRT Africa, the Electric Vehicle Road Trip Africa, DJ Fresh joined us for a few hours from Pretoria into Vereeniging, and we had no issues. We could just drive on down there. So the current ranges of the vehicles now, and it keeps improving, it would satisfy anyone's needs in Johannesburg or in the wider Gauteng province.
Speak to us about some of the practicalities then. Hypothetically speaking, an Ayanda buys an electric car. What does that mean for the infrastructure I need today to ensure that I can continue using it with ease?
Yeah, so it does always depend. So, for example, if you lived in a house with a garage, then it would be very easy to set this up. If you lived in an apartment with car parking, then either you would try and install a charging station there, or you would rely on some of the existing public charging stations that are available. And those tend to be in strategic locations, so they can be petrol stations, could be shopping malls, so that you can just charge whilst you're out for lunch or dinner, or you're doing some shopping. So charging, there are no real issues with charging, especially on a local basis. Now, when you get into the longer distances, and that's what we do with the electric vehicle road trip, where we drove from Pretoria to Cape Town, then there is longer ranges where you're expecting to charge the vehicle in a very short amount of time. So there are fast chargers to cater for that. And it's not like we drive to Cape Town on a weekly basis or a daily basis. So local charging is absolutely fine. Long distance charging is sufficient. It's good to go from today.
So today, in 2020, you and I are speaking about electric cars. Do we imagine a context where we can start speaking about electric planes? And I'm talking commercial planes where people do fly from Joburg to Cape Town on a weekly basis. Because there are some people, trust me, they exist in a place like South Africa.
That is the dream. And this route, Johannesburg to Cape Town, is one of the busiest routes in the whole world, because it is, the best way to get down to Cape Town if you need to be there for a few days. There are lots of developments happening all over the world, whether it's on electric planes or hydrogen fuel cell planes, that are looking to cover some short to medium term distances. So you definitely couldn't do a London to Johannesburg, probably, in the next few decades. But the Johannesburg to Cape Town, that would look more promising. And I think there's going to be a big development across Europe, because there are flights that take place where it's Glasgow to London. It's the same country, very short distance, but people still do it. So if we can electrify those or go to hydrogen fuel cell, then we can all fly with less guilt, because at the end of the day, we love to fly, we love to travel. But the impact that we're having is just too great for our future kids and grandkids.
Absolutely, and hopefully COVID is under control by then. But before I let you go, I mean, are we able to speak about some of the numbers insofar as the electric cars are concerned? And by that I mean the costs. Typically speaking, what is the range of a cost for an electric car in a place like South Africa?
Yeah, well, there's definitely no hiding away from the fact that the cost is quite high today. And one of those reasons is actually that the import duty on electric vehicles is higher for than it would be for an internal combustion engine. So what the National Association for Automotive Manufacturers, NAMSA, one of our strategic partners for Smarter Mobility Africa, what they've put out last week to the government is a call to basically reduce that higher import duty on electric vehicles so that it meets the same import duty as an internal combustion engine. So that will obviously bring down the cost. It will encourage local and international manufacturers to start selling their vehicles in South Africa, because currently you can only actually buy two vehicles. That's Jaguar, BMW, and then the Mini has just been launched as well. So that's 3 electric vehicles, but that's 3 out of almost 250 models that exist around the world. So South Africa at the moment is currently not benefiting from the choice of different performance electric vehicles that exist.
Well, it's certainly an interesting discussion. And again, we look eagerly to the release of that survey as you gauge the sentiment of South Africans about whether or not they would opt for an electric car if they had the option. Thanks very much for weighing in for us all the way from Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. That's Ben Pullen, who's CEO of Generation.e. That's a company really looking into the different possibilities of whether or not a country like South Africa is ready for the mass rollout of things like electric cars. All right, still to come for you on the AM Report in just a moment.